Now, the latest ceasefire in Sudan has been in effect for less than 24 hours. Since mid-April, the army leader of the East African country has been fighting for control over the paramilitary RSF group. While it's believed up to 1 million people may have fled the fighting, there's still many civilians trapped by the running battles, particularly around the capital, Khartoum. Let's find out if the 6-week conflict has paused enough for humanitarian assistance to move into the capital. I'm joined by our correspondent in Sudan, Naba Mohiedeen, joining us live from the city of Madani. Naba, thank you so much for your time. When we spoke yesterday, that ceasefire hadn't yet kicked in. What's been happening since it started? Has the fighting stopped?
Actually, since the ceasefire entered into force with a few minutes, people in Khartoum and residents heard heavy weapons and heavy fightings in northeastern Khartoum cities. And some reports said that was the military tried to chase mobile units by RSF. They were using residential areas in central Khartoum and in eastern Khartoum as hideouts, as they lost most of their main camps in eastern Khartoum and central Khartoum. So when the ceasefire entered into force, within few minutes, people heard fighting renewed again. But this morning, people reported their ability to move around and to get some supplies from local markets, which was not possible for the past 5 weeks and almost 6 weeks. So people are optimistic about this ceasefire. Yes, there is fighting, but it was this morning it was not heavy as before, and it's not targeting civilians or civilian infrastructure. It's mainly about mobile units and attacking trading attacks between RSF and the military. So people now are moving. It's not very moving, but it's not very safe, but people are optimistic because for the first time it's monitored by a mechanism, and they think it will help a lot in relieving at least the humanitarian situation in the capital Khartoum and in other intensified areas like western Darfur and northern Kordofan, and also regional Sudan, Coast City, where clashes there morphed into tribal clashes. So yes, we are monitoring the ceasefire, and we shall keep our eyes on it to see any violations or any indicators for a better situation in the coming days.
So hopeful signs, even though there was a bit of sporadic fighting and fire in the first hours of the ceasefire, hopeful signs that things are starting to calm down now. So the plan is to get a humanitarian corridor up and running. Just talk to me about what, if this ceasefire does indeed continue to hold, what's going to happen in the next few days? What's the plan?
Actually, if this ceasefire particularly fail, it will, of course, be a very bad indicator for the international community that waved with new sanctions against the generals and the rival generals and against the two troops and against Sudan generally. So Sudan will lose this battle if this ceasefire this time shall not hold. So of course it will be very difficult for Sudan, and it's, specifically for the humanitarian situation, it will be very difficult because people are so hopeful that this ceasefire and humanitarian corridors shall pave the way for bigger assistance that is allocated by the United Nations, and they were trying to deliver those materials for hospitals in Khartoum, for markets in Khartoum, and for citizens inside the capital. So if this ceasefire this time fail, it will be a very bad indicator, and actually it may lead to a prolonged fighting, not only in the capital, but also there is fears of extension of the fighting. But if it holds this time, of course it shall pave the way for a comprehensive resolution for the whole crisis, not only a temporary ceasefire. If the two warring factions adhere it and respect it, and of course not violate it. So this ceasefire and the coming days will definitely determine the future of the country and the future of this chaotic fighting in the capital and across Sudan generally.
So this is absolutely crucial, and if the ceasefire fails, Sudan is essentially going to be isolated, and everyone, both sides in the fighting and of course civilians, are really going to suffer. Do you have an update on how many civilians have fled the country, either over the borders or just displaced within Sudan?
Actually, yes, there is reports by UN showing figures of 1.1 million Sudanese people fled internally, and they are displaced in other regions inside Sudan, including Al Jazeera region where I'm staying and reporting right now, and in northern Sudan also, and in eastern Sudan, and in some parts of western Sudan, safer parts. So people are moving and they are living with their relatives or living in nearby camps. There is no literally camps like the refugees camps, but for the people who they don't have relatives in the regions, they are staying in public buildings, in schools, sometimes they are hosted by other locals. So more than 1.1 million fled the war from Khartoum to other regions, and more than 250,000 people have entered neighboring countries. In the top of it is Egypt, and then Ethiopia, South Sudan, Chad, and Central African Republic. There is also 60 to 90,000 people in Chad. They are living very dire situation. Most of them are vulnerable children and women who left their fathers and husbands in Darfur, because Darfur, after this fighting in Khartoum, it morphed into tribal clashes, and the situation there is very fragile. So more than 250,000 people entered neighboring countries, including the 5 neighboring countries I mentioned, and over 1.1 million fled the war from Khartoum. We are expecting this number shall be doubled during this ceasefire, because if people felt it's safe to move from Khartoum, definitely we will see also about 700,000 people will flee the capital Khartoum, and that makes the number of residents right now 6 million, which is really bigger for such chaotic conflict. So the numbers right now are rising, and we are expecting even bigger number of internally displaced people and also refugees in neighboring countries.
All right, thank you so much for that update. Let us hope that that ceasefire holds so that people can get to safety. Naba Mohiedeen is our correspondent in Sudan, telling us hopeful signs that this new ceasefire is holding so that a humanitarian corridor can open up.